Hi, I'm Bill Conger, Chief Curator at Peoria Riverfront Museum. Welcome to the second exhibition in the America 250 series, Peoria Plays America. Fogelberg is an examination of the life and career, both public and private, of Peoria's folk rock son, Dan Fogelberg. And I'd like to thank Jean Fogelberg for her partnership and her assistance in lending all of these amazing objects for this exhibition. Along with assistance from sponsors, the Fogelberg Foundation of Peoria, Museum Plus, America 250 donors, the Visionary Society, and Friends of Performance. Let's go in and see what's here. Dan, of course, born in Peoria to a musical family. Both his mother and father were musicians. His father famously was the musical conductor and instructor at Woodruff High School, and then went on to become the instructor at Pekin High School. So Lawrence Fogelberg's name was really ingrained in the area. Dan, of course, inherited a lot of that amazing musical talent. He also wasn't very hard to look at, as you can tell by this amazing photograph that we have acquired as one of our 25 objects that we're collecting for the America 250 celebration. This photograph was taken by Henry Diltz, famous rock photographer who really carved out the look of early 70s, late 60s into the 1980s, the era particularly of the Laurel Canyon, Southern California sound. Eagles, Dan Fogelberg, James Taylor, on and on. It's really hard to find a photograph of Dan that wasn't taken by Henry, and a number of those are included in this exhibition. This one is amazing. It was taken in Dan's old broken down truck, but the framing device of the broken window kind of gives this folk singer, this folk artist, a little bit of a rock and roll edge. It's an amazing photograph. We're happy to have it in our permanent collection. Early on, Dan Fogelberg is performing in high school, writing his own songs. He becomes part of a band called the Coachmen. Shortly after he joins the band, they call themselves the New Coachmen. And ironically, something kind of connected to Gary Richrath, our prior exhibition, in Peoria at Expo Gardens in 1969, The Who came from overseas to play in our fair town, and both Suburban 9 to 5, Gary Richrath's band, and the New Coachmen opened for The Who. So Gary Richrath and Dan Fogelberg opened for The Who in 1969, kind of signaling a symbolic connection between those two as they would eventually move on together to Champaign, Illinois, where Dan was an art student, and shortly into his academic career came home to let his parents know he would indeed be leaving school. And he and a young manager, producer, Irving Azoff, left westward to LA, and the rest kind of becomes history. We have an array of amazing journals and handwritten lyrics that were provided to us from Jean. Kind of a great point of public pride, a Woodruff High School notebook is used for some of his very early lyrics. This is around 1971. A lot of these lyrics went on to become finished songs. Some of them are written as finished songs. But what we get to see as we look through these journals are the development of his ideas. In fact, probably one of his famous songs, which takes place in Peoria off of the album The Innocent Age, is Same Old Lang Syne. Same Old Lang Syne is present here in song form in his very early journals. He has the title, but the actual lyrics to the song are nothing like what he comes up with. This is written not quite 10 years prior, but a number of years prior to the actual event and subsequent song, which would fit the title, which he had. And this kind of pushing and pulling and the development of this artwork in Dan's life is what makes this exhibition just so rich. Along with the assortment of incredible awards that we have on the wall, We have objects that were important to Dan and also important to his fans. So this beautiful ceramic porcelain doll is not just something that Dan kept around. Anybody who's a fan of Dan's knows that the cover of The Innocent Age has this doll propped up against an actual headstone in an actual cemetery. And provided to us from Gene Fogelberg is the preserved doll that was actually photographed on that iconic album. These are incredible kind of touchstones and looks into the professional world of Dan Fogelberg, including this beautiful moonstone ring that he is wearing on his album Souvenirs, produced by future Eagles member Joe Walsh. The combination of Joe and Dan create quite a formidable sound. It's where they begin experimenting with the overlay of Dan's voice, which would become Dan's signature sound, kind of the wall of Dan, as it were. Sometimes they would record the very same phrasing and then also harmonies 10, 20 times, creating this amazing effect with his already very beautiful voice. Coupled with the professional works in the exhibition, we wanted to take a look at Dan's private life, his personal world. He was a deeply private person who loved the coast of Maine. He sailed along the islands of Maine and kept copious notes about his sailing. Dan was a consummate chronicler of everything, of how a song is put together, of the development of lyrics, of the way a video is shot, and in this case, every move in his sailboat is journaled and reflected upon. So these are incredible looks into what really made him tick outside of music. Also, something very personal about Dan, he was an artist. That's why he was at U of I to begin with. He was a painter. Dan never gave up painting. His passion for that art form was with him his whole life. Some of his album covers are his own works. And these three works are an example of Dan's painting. And flanked on the right-hand side, of course, Joe Walsh from the Eagles. They were very good friends, some say best friends, who shared a lot of time together early on in their careers. We saved the best for the center. So in some ways, we saved the best for the first. But chronologically, it makes more sense. Let's talk about these two things in the center of the room. What we have is Dan's setup. Dan was famous for just having a rug, usually a kind of Navajo pattern, with his microphone, his favorite Martin guitar, and his famous chair. The guitar and the chair are Dan's. These are the two instruments that you would see him almost routinely throughout his entire career use at some point in his shows. The chair has an amazing story. It actually is not the original chair, though it is Dan's, and he did tour with it. The original chair, which he said fit him perfectly, was lost. And the tour manager was struggling to find a replacement, which they did in the town, I believe, of Indianapolis. This chair was inserted the next night, and Dan never knew the difference, according to Gene. So in hopes that this never happened again, was labeled on the back with two pieces of electrical tape, "Ye old sensitive seat," so it never got lost again. And just another kind of part of why Dan's connection to the stage and to his audience was so compelling, because he really considered every part of the stage integral to the performance. The guitar is his favorite guitar. That Martin really is #1 acoustic guitar he famously referred to as Buck. And this is the actual instrument in our exhibition. We have in this exhibition an incredible array of video works. Dan did not produce a lot of video content, but there are some concerts that we were able to find. There is an unpublished song called the Illinois River Song. You can also see Dan in his sailboat on the coast of Maine, having the time of his life. And his very famous video and audio release called Greetings from the West is featured on this as well, in which he plays a Stratocaster called Blackie, which he considered his main electric guitar. And that very strap is the one included on that video. So another iconic moment in this incredibly rich exhibition. Dan's father, Lawrence Fogelberg, impossible to say how impacting Lawrence was in Dan's life. Probably one of the most indelible songs ever written about a father, the leader of the band, of course, dedicated to Dan's father. Very unfortunately was released around the time of his father's passing. But his dad was able to hear the song and considered it one of the high points of his life and career. And Dan has said in interviews that if he wrote no other song, that would be the song that he wished he would contribute to the world and to the memory of his father. Dan Fogelberg was a special musician. We like to think that his birthplace and the place that put him forth on a track to superstardom, Peoria, Illinois, was part of that. And we hope that you come here to be a part of this exhibition called Fogelberg.